another version of unlikely Bible heroes. And when I call the names of these four men, I might think, wow, we love those heroes. We admire those heroes. How are they unlikely Bible heroes? Because we're looking backward, and we sometimes see the end first. And we see Peter, Andrew, James, and John as four of those that Jesus spent all night in prayer before he chose them. We definitely recognize them as spiritual heroes, spiritual men that we want to imitate and follow. But it wasn't always that way. They weren't always Peter, Andrew, James, and John apostles. They were always Peter, Andrew, James, and John. In Matthew chapter 4, beginning in verse 18, Jesus is beginning his personal ministry, and he's begun to preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand, and people need to repent. And he's going to choose some people to help him. And it says he's walking by the Sea of Galilee, and he sees two brothers, Simon, who's called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. He said to them, "Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. And going on, he saw two more brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, in a boat with Zebedee, their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed Jesus. When we look as time continues and we see them walking with Jesus for 3+ years in his earthly ministry, we see them there after Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. We see them on Pentecost. We see them proclaiming the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's easy almost to forget that they weren't always Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the apostles, the disciples. You see, these men were lowly fishermen. And I'm not in any way disparaging fishing. It was an honorable occupation, but it wasn't like we think about today, riding around in a $40,000 bass boat, casting a few lures, and going back home. Fishing was hard work. It was a work where they cast nets and not lines usually. It was hard, it was long. Sometimes it was they were not very successful in their endeavor. Just fishermen. They weren't Pharisees. They weren't people of Gamaliel's teaching. They weren't people that were highly honored in society. They were lowly fishermen, but Jesus had a plan for them. What plan does he have for you? What plan does he have for me? And am I as willing to be used as Peter, Andrew, James, and John were? I think it's worth noting that when Jesus called them, when he found them, they were working. Verse 18 says that Peter and Andrew were casting a net into the sea. Verse 22 says that James and John were mending their net. Jesus was looking for workers. He wasn't looking for someone sitting under the shade that didn't have very much get up and go. Someone that was complaining and whining and fussing, and he was looking for people that were willing to work. Is that me? Is that you? When Jesus sees and finds us, does he find us working? We see that these men became our heroes because they left their nets at once and followed Jesus. They left their livelihood. Would you have blamed Peter and Andrew? Would you have blamed James and John if they said, Lord, this is really important. We need to sleep on this thing. We need to go home and talk to our families. We need to give this some time. Let's get back to you in 72 hours. That's not what they did. It said they immediately, verse 20, Peter and Andrew left their nets. In verse 22, it says that James and John immediately left the boat and their father. They left not only their livelihood, they left not only their most important asset, their boat, but they left their father and followed Jesus. Have we left all to follow Jesus? Are we willing to put everything behind or aside so that we can make sure above all we're following Jesus? Verse 19 says Jesus made them fishers of men. He made them a promise. He said, if you'll follow me, I will make you fishers of men. Was it good to catch the other fish? Absolutely. That's how they fed their family. That's how they made their living. But Jesus said, I've got a greater and a better calling. I've got a greater and a better pond to fish in and greater fish to catch. You know, he said the same thing to us. He'll make us fishers of men today. Have we accepted that promise? Have we allowed Jesus to help us to become fishers of men as well? These 4 men were ultimately important in carrying the gospel to the entire world. It was to these 4 and others that Jesus said, go into all the world, preach the gospel to every creature. What a challenging task. And they accepted it. Colossians chapter 1 said they succeeded in doing that. Who? 4 fishermen. 4 men that Jesus found working. But they were men that were workers. They were men that were willing to leave everything and follow Jesus. They allowed Jesus to mold and shape them and make them fishers of men. And they became instrumental in carrying the gospel to the entire world. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, fishers of men. Am I a fisher of men?